Who decides whether hundreds live or thousands cease to exist? Is it ever truly justified to encounter violence with more violence? And at the end of it, who walks away guilty and who walks away vindicated? Is a guilty conscience even real among those who hold that kind of power? Or is morality a luxury for people who don't have to make those calls? When millions disappear, whether by nature's indifference or someone's deliberate will, does history remember the architects of those moments with grace, or does it judge them? And perhaps the hardest question of all, do we forgive them? Not because they were right, but because we understood them. When it comes to Mordin, there are plenty of aspects of his character that people find fascinating. For one, he reads like a well-developed character from the Big Bang Theory, but without the flaws. The almost theatrical display of nerd culture is unmistakably there, and one could easily attribute his rapid-fire way of speaking to how younger generations of gamers talk: fast, caffeinated, perpetually switched on. But underneath that facade lies something far more complex. At one point in his story, Mordin will either become the savior of an entire race, sacrificing everything for what he finally accepts as right, or he will turn his back on whatever compassion his scientific mind allows. Siding with the Dalatras, the primary political leader of the Salarian Union, in her conviction that the Krogan simply do not deserve a second chance at earning a legitimate place in the galactic order. Two paths, one character, but who ultimately decides which one Mordin should take? What Mass Effect does with Mordin is extraordinary, and in many ways it mirrors what history has done with scientists like Oppenheimer. Both individuals are given a once-in-a-lifetime project, something so complex, so far beyond the grasp of most, that even translating its scale into tangible work requires a mind that operates on a different level entirely. This isn't the kind of thing a politician dreams up on a whim. The idea of making an entire species disappear is one thing. Actually engineering it is another. And Mordin, by his own admission in Mass Effect 2, loved every second of it. Waking up with ideas, working through the day consumed by the problem, going to sleep only to start again tomorrow. By his own words, these were the best years of his life. That joy is precisely the blind spot. When you are that deep inside the work, that fluent in its complexity, that alive in its challenge, the question, is this going too far, doesn't always find its way to the surface. Depending on your choices across the trilogy, Mordin may eventually come clean and admit it was a mistake. But was it one in the moment? It is far easier to feel remorse after delivering a solution that vastly exceeded the scope of the problem. It is something else entirely to stay clear-headed and find the right measure of response while the problem is still breathing down your neck. Karl Jaspers, the German philosopher, comes to mind here. In the aftermath of World War II, he developed the concept of collective guilt and moral responsibility, grappling with the question that feels almost impossibly heavy. What do you owe history when you participated in something monstrous, even with reasons you believed were sound? Jaspers didn't declare everyone equally guilty. He made careful distinctions: criminal guilt, political guilt, moral guilt, and metaphysical guilt. And it's hard not to map those distinctions onto the individual we've been discussing. Oppenheimer sits somewhere between political and moral guilt, a man who didn't fully grasp what he was releasing into the world until the world showed him. Mordin carries something closer to moral and metaphysical guilt. He understood exactly what he was building, lived well inside it, and only later allowed himself to feel the full weight of what that meant. To even be in the room where a decision like that is made, one affecting millions of lives, is not something any honest person would take lightly. And yet, we often reduce these moments to abstraction. The classic thought experiment. Do you push the button? As if the entire moral burden could be stripped down to a single finger on a single switch, erasing every sleepless night, every calculation, every rationalization that leads a person to that moment. The reality is that we rarely have the luxury of reflection when it matters most. In the heat of those moments, there is never enough time, and the decisions get made anyway. But what about the Krogan? One of the most fascinating aspects of this entire moral conundrum echoes something we've wrestled with throughout human history. Do children deserve to be held accountable for the crimes of their parents? In some ways, the Krogan are a civilization that was uplifted by the Salarians culturally and technologically, yet in many respects still finding their footing as a people. That's not a condemnation, it's a structural reality. They were advanced before they were ready, and the consequences of that imbalance ripple through everything. The bigger picture often escapes them. The long game is not instinctive to a species built for war and survival in the immediate sense. And so the problem Wrex or Wreav face isn't simply a cure for the genophage. It's whether there is even a path toward reshaping Krogan social norms enough to make genuine change possible. Wreav isn't interested in that path. He embodies Krogan bravado at its most destructive, blind arrogance, an appetite for more resources, more privilege, more power, with little consideration for how any of it plays out long term or how it affects other races. BioWare's decision to offer less sympathy when Wreav leads makes complete sense within the logic of the story. Under his leadership, there is no room for Krogan growth, no room for developing the kind of intelligence, diplomacy, art, or social framework that the other council races would recognize as progress. It stops being a question of affection or prejudice toward the Krogan. It becomes pure pragmatism, because there simply isn't enough time in the galaxy's crisis for a species still at war with itself. And this is where BioWare does something that doesn't get nearly enough credit. The way cultural development, social behaviors, shared norms, collective identity determines whether a civilization survives is not just a game mechanic. It's one of the most consistently documented patterns in human history. Nations and people that fail to evolve their internal culture alongside their external power rarely endured. The Krogan under Wreav are a case study in exactly that. To quote the elusive man himself, "Diplomacy is great when it works, but how many times has there simply been no road left for diplomacy? Only one path forward, and an entire nation reduced to a footnote in a history book because its leaders were too arrogant to look left or right." How many civilizations become obsolete not because they lacked strength, but because they refused to change? The consequences of that refusal are rarely discussed with the weight they deserve. Mass Effect puts that weight directly in your hands. You can act on it. You can have a say in whether an entire race is saved or condemned. And the variable that matters most isn't the genophage, it's culture. It's how cordial, how self-aware, how forward-looking a civilization chooses to become. That's what makes Wrex such a compelling counterpoint to everything Wreav represents. Wrex understands what the average Krogan is capable of, not just as a warrior, but as an individual. He has a vision for where that culture could go, and he's not sentimental about how to get there. As he puts it himself, he'll drag them all to glory, whether they like it or not. Under Wrex, the entire conversation shifts. Being against what the Krogan stand for looks completely different when the person leading them is collected, logical, and building towards something. The Krogan can have a future. That remains true regardless of whether the genophage is ever cured. Because the real question was never just biological. It was always about whether the Krogan were willing to become something the galaxy could make room for. No, perhaps something the galaxy could be proud of. Think about it. What happens to the Krogan and to the galaxy if they remain locked inside Wreav's framework and eventually develop nuclear capability beyond what they already demonstrated? The answer isn't hypothetical. They nuked their own atmosphere. They created a radioactive wasteland on their homeworld through sheer unchecked aggression. It's rarely discussed, but it's a reasonable assumption that the Council's intervention in galactic affairs is a part of what kept that destruction from spreading further. Wreav's leadership doesn't just raise concerns through his actions. It raises them through everything the Krogan's history already tells us. Give him real power, and this time the whole galaxy might get pulled into it. This is why the distinction Wrex represents matters so much. Wrex isn't the smartest person on Shepard's ship. He knows it. He owns it. He may not be the most moral or the most disciplined either, but he is acutely aware of what the Krogan become when left unchecked, because he has fought that same pull within himself. His mastery isn't over others, it's over his own impulses, and that quiet, unglamorous self-control is what sets him apart. He becomes strength for the Krogan not just through what he does, but through how he carries himself. His ability to be cordial, to earn genuine respect from other races, that isn't a small thing. It shifts how the Krogan are perceived, and it shifts how the Krogan perceive themselves and how they see it possible to walk the same path. All of this points to something very human at its core. The difference a single leader makes can be the difference between a civilization and a footnote in a history book. And the hardest part of leadership, the part that determines everything, is refusing to be corrupt by it. Not surrendering to the ego or appetite, remembering always who is depending on the decisions you make. While being a brilliant scientist, Mordin's guilt feels thrust upon him. Yes, he is the expert. He is the one needed. But it is rarely discussed whether he should have to bear the weight of righting the wrongs of his entire race, or the whole galactic civilization. That burden wasn't chosen, it was inherited by proximity and capability. As for the Krogan, they ultimately decide their own fate. The cure matters, but the choice of who leads matters more. It is almost impossible to place the full weight of all of this on one person, and yet Mordin rises to the challenge. In all honesty, Mordin is not the hero Krogan want, but he is the one they need. I hope that if we ever stand where he stood, we at least have the honesty and the strength to know exactly what we are doing. Because if this story teaches us anything, it's that we shouldn't wait for heroes and we shouldn't hold out for miracles. What we can do is uplift the people around us. Try to be a positive influence within our own small circle. Try not to ignite conflict where it doesn't need to exist, and try to resolve it where it does. Lead by example. Show that progress is possible, that it doesn't always have to be repetition. Even becoming 0.01% better every day is a step in the right direction. And without those small steps, even Wrex couldn't have brought the Krogan back onto the path towards something the galaxy could be proud of. What are your thoughts on Krogan's leadership difference, and was there a part where Wreav could have saved their race and still remain set in their own traditions? Or was Wrex wrong in how he went about dealing with genophage? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe for similar topics, and I will talk to you in the next video. Take care.